This is question number 3 of homework 3 for chapter 2. Assume that both the US and the Canadian demand curves for lumber are linear. So graphically speaking, that means the both demand curves are straight lines, as shown on this graph here. The Canadian demand curve lies inside the US curve. The Canadian demand curve hits the axis at a lower price and a lower quantity than the US curve. So this is the Canadian demand curve, and the yellow curve here, actually the yellow line here is the US demand demand curve. As mentioned in the setup, the Canadian demand curve lies inside the US demand curve. Draw the aggregate demand curve for the two countries. Explain the relationship between the country and aggregate demand curves in words. Using the multi-point curved line drawing tool, show the market demand curve for lumber. Label this demand curve D market. So we know that the market demand curve is the horizontal sum of the individual demand curves. But one thing that which is easy to miss is the fact that for a certain range of the demand curve, if only one individual demand exists, then the market demand is equal to the demand of that individual country. So you can see here, above here the price is 8. Above 8, the Canadian demand is 0, because Canadian demand starts from 8, but US demand is positive. So when the price is above 8, the market demand still exists, but it's the same as the US demand. Graphically speaking, that means the market demand curve above 8, the price of 8, coincides with the US demand curve. And this is the portion that many students forgot to draw, and that's why their answer was marked as incorrect. So now let me draw this market demand curve. And below 8, actually that's probably easier to see. Can see that we start from because both demand curves are demand lines, straight lines, so their sum also need to be straight lines. Hence, if we can pinpoint 2 points on the straight line, then we can pin down the position of the straight line. Hence, why don't we fix the first point as the point on the horizontal axis. So you can see that Canadian demand crosses the x-axis, horizontal axis, at quantity 8, and US demand at a quantity of 18. So 8 plus 18, that's 26. So our first point starts from 26, and the second point below price 8, the market demand is the horizontal sum of both. So when the price is 8, the Canadian demand is 0, and the US demand, according to the scale here, is 10. Hence, the market demand equals the US demand, which is 10. And don't forget, as I just mentioned, don't forget the portion which is above 8. And that portion actually coincides with the US demand. Alright, so that's it. And this is the market demand. And let's check our answer. Good job. So the market demand curve for lumber is the horizontal sum of the US and Canadian lumber demand curves. Final check. We're done.